What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson, and the New York Giants are officially in the hunt for a top 3 overall draft pick and for a spot in the 2023 playoffs. It's a weird season to be a New York Giants fan, that's for sure, and right now they currently hold the 6th overall pick in the upcoming draft. However, they're only 2 games out of a playoff spot. At 4-8, this team could legitimately make the postseason. We're going to go ahead and dive into that, talk about the schedule upcoming for the Giants, how it's really favorable. There's a clear, wide open path for them to make it to the postseason, if you could believe that or not, but then there's also a clear path to them landing a top 3 draft pick. Again, they're in the middle of the road here. It's a very weird season to be rooting for the New York Giants. What do you want? Do you want to go to the playoffs? Do you want to get a top 3 pick and just full reset and hit the rebuild button? You guys let us know down below in the comments, and of course that's what we're going to be discussing in today's episode of Fireside Giants. But before we dive into all that, make sure to like if you do enjoy this episode, subscribe to the channel if you are new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts on the topics down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And how are you feeling about the Giants simultaneously being in the hunt for a top draft pick and in the hunt for the postseason?
I'm doing pretty good, and the life of a Giants fan is one of many mysteries. I don't necessarily know how to explain to anyone how being a Giants fan feels. It's like one day you're like, this is the worst team on earth, and then the next day the Minnesota Vikings are losing to the Bears on Monday Night Football, and the Giants are somehow have a top 6 pick and also 2 games out of the wild card. Do I want to watch the Giants go to the playoffs and get washed by the Eagles in the divisional round? Not really. Do I want to make the playoffs? Of course. I think that in the end of the day, it's like the most conflicting thing ever. It's like we know we're not getting past the Eagles. And a lot of people say anything can happen in the playoffs. My friends, this is not Eli Manning and Michael Strahan's Giants or Victor Cruz's Giants. And that's just reality. Anything could happen in the playoffs, but let's be honest here. Tommy DeVito's not leading us to a Super Bowl win. And if he does, I will absolutely just praise this. I'll build a freaking shrine in him in my apartment about this guy, because that would be the most insane thing. I don't even eat dairy. I'll eat all the freaking mozzarella he wants. Like, that's that's the reality. Tommy DeVito doing that would be the most unlikely thing in relative sports history. But all the best, obviously wishing for nothing but hope and success for this Giants team. With that being said, top 6 pick and 2 games out of the playoffs. I think we'd be the first team in history to make the postseason after starting 2-8. I'm all for breaking records, maybe not those type of records, because we don't want to be 2-8 in the first place. I'd rather be a good team and, competitive and winning and healthy. And right now we find ourselves with a little bit of confidence. And, Darius Slayton kind of said it best. This team was falling apart at the seams when Daniel Jones went down, Tyrod goes down, Tommy DeVito, an undrafted free agent out of Illinois, steps into the fold. Obviously, he was at Syracuse before that, and instill some confidence in a group that otherwise didn't have much. Now, beating the Commanders isn't much to write home about. Beating the Patriots is even less so. Let's see how they do against Green Bay coming off the bye. I want to see them go out and compete against a team that just beat the brakes off the Detroit Lions, a good football team who has won some big games this year. Green Bay's no joke. They've won 2 as well. Jordan Love is coming into his own. They look like they're taking some big steps forward, some massive strides. Rashawn Gary is an absolute stud for them. I'm curious to see how exactly the Giants deal with a team of this magnitude, at least not magnitude, but rather a team of this kind of upward trajectory. And both of us coming off 2 wins, I do believe that right now, if I'm looking at the Giants as a realistic playoff contender, I'm going to say that's unlikely. I don't know how you feel about that. I probably imagine you're in the same boat. We're more likely to get a top 5 pick. And look, we'll talk about both sides here. The Bears winning last night was really good for the Giants in terms of getting back into the top 5. Minnesota Vikings losing last night was really good for the Giants, rather the Bears winning and the Minnesota Vikings losing was really good for the Giants' playoff hope. So, it's kind of like this two-edged sword right now. Like, do you want to go to the playoffs and, really know you're not going to do much there with the Eagles definitely outweighing us? Or do you want that high draft pick? So it's kind of a crazy situation. That game had pretty significant implications for the Giants. How are you feeling after that? I was up. I was watching. Do I care about the Bears or Viking? Absolutely not. But the fact that it had any impact on the Giants, I'm there watching at 11 p.m. caring about this team. And people that say, you can't be a fan if you want a high draft pick. You can't. I was up at 11 freaking p.m. watching the freaking Bears play the Vikings, and you want to call me not a fan? I don't want to hear it. I love this freaking team. All I want is sustained success for this team. All I want to do is wake up on Sundays excited and ready to pump out content for you guys about a team we all love. And unfortunately, that has not been the case for quite a long time since we've started this journey.
Yeah, it's been a while since. I mean, we've been kind of doing this thing for years and years now. Only one season have we been able to talk about winning football, and that was last year. Now we're back to being a 4-8 losing football team, and I want to talk about the chances of the playoffs, and I want to talk about the draft order, but I'm going to talk about the playoffs first because I'm going to be honest with you. I am sick and tired about talking about the draft order. I really just feel like we shouldn't be discussing these types of things in November, and to be fair, we were talking about this in October. Like we've been talking about the draft order for way too long, for way earlier than we were supposed to this season. This was a team that we thought would be in the playoff hunt at this time, but with probably 3 more wins on their schedule by now, it's not the season that we dreamed of. It's not the season that we expected from the Giants. But here we are, and we are firmly in the playoff hunt. You said you imagine that I don't feel that way, that I don't think that the Giants are realistically in the playoff hunt. Actually, Alex, I do. I think that they really are in the playoff hunt. And this isn't just me being an optimist. This isn't me saying that, getting a draft pick is bad. Listen, this is me saying that you have to take a close look at the schedule and see how realistic it really is for the Giants to make the playoffs, because they just have to beat 3 mediocre teams and they're pretty much in. It's really weird how the stars have aligned for Big Blue, but they truly have. And again, am I saying that this team is going to make the playoffs? Absolutely freaking not. Like I've been saying for the past few episodes, we see regressions to the mean. We saw this team be just maybe the worst in the NFL. Probably 3 weeks ago, we were calling them the worst team in the NFL. And now all of a sudden, we're talking about them as playoff contenders. So, no, this is not me throwing my confidence into this team and saying that we're making the playoffs and Tommy DeVito is leading us to a championship. That's not at all what I'm saying. But if you ask me whether or not I think that this team is in the hunt realistically, my answer is yes, because of their schedule. It's not because of what I think they are as a football team. It's because their schedule has aligned like the stars. Now, here's the schedule. I'm going to break it down. They're on their bye week this week, which we all know. Coming out of that bye week, they're playing the Green Bay Packers, then the New Orleans Saints, then they face Philly, then they're playing the Rams, and then they finish with Philly. Now, let's take a look at the 2023 NFL playoff picture. In that 7th seed are the Minnesota Vikings. They're 6-6, but catching up to them in that 7th seed, right behind them, the Green Bay Packers, the Los Angeles Rams, the New Orleans Saints, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the New York Giants. Now, 3 of those 4 teams in front of the New York Giants, the Giants play them. So if the Giants somehow manage to pick up a win against the Packers, if they somehow manage to pick up a win against the Rams and a win against the Saints, they are going to find their way in the playoffs, so long as the Vikings lose about 2 more games or 3 more games this season. Now, I'm assuming that the Giants aren't going to beat the Eagles either one of the 2 times they play them. However, that Week 18 matchup, the Eagles are not likely to be starting any of their starters. They are likely to be resting for the playoffs because they are looking like a lock for the 1st seed in the NFC. So you're talking about the Giants having 3 very winnable games left on their schedule, potentially a 4th winnable game on their schedule if they can beat the Eagles' backups. And if they end up with 4 wins to close out the season, they would be 8-8 and absolutely sitting at the 7th seed in the wild card round. Can you believe that? I mean, this is just crazy to take a look at the schedule, look at the way that the stars have aligned. If Tommy DeVito gets hot here, stays hot, and the Giants pick up some of these wins, they absolutely can be in the playoffs. And it's mind-boggling because, like I said, 2 weeks ago, I declared that this was the worst team in football, one of the worst offenses ever put onto a football field at the National Football League level, and here we are talking about them realistically having a chance to make it to the playoffs. Now, that, of course, opens up Pandora's box, and that has a discussion here attached to it. With a team that we consider to be this bad, is it a good thing for them to go to the playoffs, or should they be hoping for the draft pick and rebuilding? That's obviously the moral conundrum that we all have to face now as Giants fans, but I'm just going to set the record straight on what I think that the Giants should do, how I feel about it. If you have a chance for the playoffs, you freaking take it. There are only so many seasons that you are going to be able to watch the New York Giants in your lifetime. There's only so many games that you're going to be able to watch. No day is guaranteed. If you can watch some New York Giants playoff football, you gotta root for it, in my opinion. So now that the Giants are in the hunt, listen, they're going to be out of the hunt if they lose next Monday night against the Packers. That's it. The dream is over. Like it's a short-lived dream if they lose on Monday night. But what I will say is that I will be rooting for them to make the playoffs. I'm just taking that stance right now. I don't care about the draft pick if we're talking about playoff football. Yes, anything can happen. I abide by that truth. I know it's not realistic, but I'm a dreamer, baby. I want to see this New York Giants team make history again. I don't really care. I'm looking forward to hopefully some playoff football for the New York Giants in January, as unrealistic as it is. And no, I don't expect it to happen, but it is what I'm going to be rooting for. Again, you only get to see your team in the playoffs every so often, as we so clearly know by now. The Giants don't make the playoffs very often, so if they have a chance, I think that they got to go for it. They got to totally run and try and beat these three teams that are very winnable, and then sneak one away from the backups of the Eagles. Then they're in the playoffs, and I think that's really interesting. But Alex, I do want to know your take on it. Like, I'm here and I'm like, F it. Go for the playoffs, baby. Let's do it. Even though we're going to get stomped in the first round, it's not realistic for us to even make the playoffs, but there is an avenue here, right? And again, I can't be any more clear about this. I don't think we're going to make the playoffs, but what do you want to happen, Alex? Like, I'm here and I'm like, F it, playoff season, baby. Are you more in the boat where I just want to see this team get that high draft pick and rebuild, or are you like, if they make the playoffs, let's freaking go?
Listen, at this point in time, I feel as though Drake May, Caleb Williams are unrealistic for us anyway. Even if we win another game, that puts us in a pretty difficult spot unless you trade up. I think trading up into the top 5 to 10 range is a lot more realistic than trading up into the 1 to 5 range, based on the fact that a lot of those teams are going to be giving up a lot to get there, or teams that are bad enough that need a quarterback are simply not going to move out. So, Jaden McDaniels, a guy that, we all really like. Some people may not like him. I would implore you to go watch him. The guy's an absolute monster, and he could be a great quarterback. There's a lot of other guys, Bo Nix, a lot of people like him, Michael Penix. There's players out there that people certainly are intrigued by, but I'll say this right now. If the Giants are going to win games, might as well go for the playoffs. You can always trade up into the top 5 to 10 range and get Jaden Daniels. I feel like that's more realistic. So, I mean, at that point, like if you're going to win 1 or 2 games, might as well just go all for it, because you're going to be falling out of the range of quarterbacks anyway. So, just take what you got. But at the same time, you ask yourself this, and one of the things that you said really kind of makes me afraid of what happened to us in the postseason. We're hoping that the Eagles sit their starters so that we can get into the playoffs. I mean, think about how ridiculous that sounds. We can't beat their starters. We know we can't beat their starters. So we're hoping to God that they rest them in week 18 so we can sneak into the postseason just to get railroaded by them in the freaking division round, if we even make it past the wild card. And in that sequence, we may have to play the Vikings again, or we may have to play another team. I don't know who that would be at this point in time. But God help us, man. We gotta hope that the Eagles sit their starters so we even have a chance at getting to the playoffs. I mean, that doesn't sound very optimistic to me. That doesn't sound very fun to me. That sounds like we're hoping that everybody else sucks so that we can be good. And you know what? I mean, look, I loved watching playoff football last year. It was awesome to win a game. It was like, holy crap, like we may actually have something. And then it all fell apart because the Eagles absolutely demolished us with no sense of resistance. We didn't even put up a fight. So, and that's been the case for years. That's been the case for the better part of a decade now. Since the championship runs, the last 10 years have been us losing to the Cowboys and Eagles consistently every single season. And that's been with Eli, that's been with Daniel Jones, that's been with anybody you throw behind that awful, god-awful offensive line. So, at this point, what my whole perspective now is that a lot of people, and this is a good argument to make for the people that are saying, like, we don't want a high draft pick, we want to win now. And the argument is, you don't know what draft pick is going to pan out. You don't know if anyone you take is going to be a good player. And I think that's a very valid and fair argument. However, my counter to that is, if you do not take shots, take opportunities, take chances on getting elite quarterback play through the draft, you are going to be a mediocre football team forever. Okay, if you don't have Patrick Mahomes, if you don't have Josh Allen, if you don't have anyone that can just kind of carry a team, Joe Burrow when he's not hurt, if you don't have our Jalen Hurts, if you don't have a guy who's going to elevate everybody and take everybody to another level, we are going to be here enjoying 2-8 wins, 3-8 wins, 4-8 wins forever. Okay, last year was an anomaly because we had the weakest schedule in football. We got lucky playing some bad defenses. We had a couple of really good moments. Daniel Jones rushed for over 700 yards. Can we expect him to do that coming off an ACL tear? I don't think so. Are we really going to sit here and act like this team is not going to be mediocre next year if we don't run back this exact same team with the difference? We're out of range of Marvin Harrison Jr. too now. So you're looking at Neighbors, you're looking at some other guys. O'Dunes, there are talents here that can make an impact. but how much of an impact, right? Like, are we really going to get that much better where we actually are going to be competitive against some of the best teams in the game? I'd rather hit reset now with a quarterback that has elite upside that we can develop over time, that's on a rookie quarterback window. Don't forget the financial impact of this, that is making $10 million compared to $50 million, $40 million. And that difference in margin and money can buy you Bobby Okereke, can buy you wide receiver ones, can buy you top cornerbacks, top pass rushers, top offensive linemen. That difference, how much different is Jaden Daniels going to be than Daniel Jones? How much different is Tommy DeVito than Daniel Jones? Ask yourself that right now. How much different is Tyrod Taylor than Daniel Jones? Is it $40 million different? I'd say it's more like 10, maybe even 5 at times. So, if that's the case, I'd rather go hit the reset with a rookie quarterback and give ourselves a chance at success for 10 years instead of 1 year here and there making the postseason and getting knocked out because we don't have a complete team. We don't have a team that can face off against great defenses and score points. Our defense can't be on the field for 30 minutes a game and sustain that level of battering and beating and exhaustion. So that's my counter. However, I did also argue on the fact that if we're going to win some games, screw it. Let's go for the playoffs. Who cares at that point? We're not even in range for quarterbacks anyway. You may as well trade up a couple spots and get a Jaden Daniels or go for the best player on the board at that point because you're not going to get Caleb or May. So you might as well go make the playoffs if you're going to win some games. And obviously it ends up being whatever, because if we win some games and don't make the playoffs, then that's like the worst case scenario, is winning games right now and not making the playoffs just to miss out on the quarterbacks. And if you do not acknowledge that is a bad scenario, I don't know what to tell you. Those little hits of dopamine in a lost season where you're winning games, if you enjoy those things, that's just settling for mediocrity. Like, if you had an employee that was doing a piss poor job, didn't hit their marks, didn't hit their quotas, would you appreciate that? Would you enjoy their work? Probably not. You'd be like, yo, work harder, do better, hit your quotas, do your job better, or I'm going to replace you. That's the logic I can come up with off the top of my head, but I imagine you guys probably want to see 10 years of sustained success, and taking shots at elite quarterback play is what you have to do to actually enjoy that. The Jets tried it with Aaron Rodgers, but he's at the end of his career. You know what I mean? He's going 1-2 years trying to get a Super Bowl. The injury obviously killed him. And that's unfortunate, but they took a shot at elite quarterback play because they know elite quarterback play results in championships, right? They weren't going to do it with Zach Wilson. The Giants need to make a play at elite quarterback play, and the reality is that they're not ready. They don't have a defense like the Jets. They don't have like a team like the Jets. I'd say the personnel in the Jets is far better in a lot of ways. I don't think that the Giants are ready to get in Aaron Rodgers and win a championship right now. They need to develop a quarterback who has sustained upside and is going to bring a lot of financial relief to this team in the future. That's my personal opinion. But again, if we're going to win some games, might as well make a run for the playoffs, because that's ultimately what that should look like, because we're not going to be in range for quarterback anyway.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's like completely valid. What I will say, though, is somewhat of a counter argument, and you kind of made this point as well. You said that, no draft pick is a guarantee, that you don't know who's going to pan out. And one of the things that you said that I liked was you can be picking really late and trade up into the top 10 to 15. But when you're picking in the top 10 to 15, it's really hard to trade up into the top 5. For the New York Giants, one example that I will throw out there, and I know it's not the best example because it's a generational, once-in-a-lifetime example, but the Kansas City Chiefs did win a playoff game and then traded up from the 20s into the 10s to land Patrick Mahomes. So there is precedent for winning football games, winning a playoff game, and then trading up and drafting your franchise quarterback. Now, again, that's a once-in-a-lifetime thing for most organizations, and for the New York Giants, considering our luck, it probably wouldn't happen. But I will just say, you don't know what draft pick is going to pan out. You don't know, maybe Caleb Williams is a bust, maybe Drake May is a bust, maybe Jaden Daniels is a bust. Maybe all of these quarterbacks just end up being a bust. It's totally possible. So if you're the New York Giants, I think that you just got to take nothing for granted and just go for the wins, in my opinion. And also, I'm talking about this from the perspective of, I'm not being completely objective here. A lot of the times I sit on this podcast and I am very objective and I try and give the facts unbiased. I will admit I'm being 100% biased right now. I want to see the New York Giants win football games. Like 2 weeks ago, if you asked me this question, I would have said, no, let's lose. Let's get that draft pick. But now that we're in the hunt, I'm like, F it. I don't care anymore. I just don't care. Like I've totally had it with this football team. I've had it with all of the losing, with all of the misery. And I understand that the likelihood is I'm going to face more misery for the final month of this season and then hopefully get rewarded with a draft pick in May. That's really nice. Or April rather. That's really nice. But I would like to just dream here for a second and just be a Giants fan for once. Like I'm in November every year and I'm like not even a Giants fan at some point. Like I know we're all Giants fans. I'm always a Giants fan, but I feel like so lost and disconnected from my joy and passion with the team when we're always talking about draft picks and losing and tanking. And I just get really sick of it. So, if the Giants do win a couple more games here and they really are in the playoff hunt, best believe I'm looking forward to the playoffs. And I'm not saying stop winning games, don't go to the playoffs. No, go to the playoffs. I will never advocate for purposely missing out on the playoffs. If the Giants really feel like they got a chance to make the playoffs, and if we feel that way, I'm rooting for it. However, I don't really feel that way. Like, this is what I'm going to root for. I'm going to hope and pray somehow that Tommy DeVito writes history for the New York Giants and brings them back to the postseason and, brings this team another Lombardi trophy. But I'm not expecting this. What I am expecting is that the New York Giants land the top 10 overall draft pick, and I think that they're going to take a quarterback with that pick. Now, I will say I kind of gave the schedule and the avenue towards landing into the postseason. So I'm going to do the opposite now and talk about what this draft order could realistically look like, the best and the worst case scenario for the Giants. Now, of course, that's subject to how you're viewing this, whether or not they should win or lose. But the best case draft pick that they could land, I honestly, if you look at this, Arizona is probably going to win another 2 games down the stretch, I would assume. I think Kyler Murray can pull 2 more games out of them, and their strength of schedule is higher than the Giants, so the Giants have the tiebreaker on them. I think Chicago's going to keep winning games, and I think that Washington is probably going to sneak out another 1 to 2 wins, especially if they do end up firing Ron Rivera. I think sometimes that breathes life into a team. They kind of play a little bit more motivated, knowing that their jobs are on the line too, so they might sneak out a couple games. And then you have a bunch of other 4-win teams who are 4-7, Tampa Bay, the New York Jets, the Chargers, the Titans. These teams I also expect to win a few games down the stretch. So realistically, the teams that are probably picking 1 and 2 are Carolina, which is owned by Chicago, and New England, which is owned by themselves. And then outside of that, the 3rd overall pick is kind of wide open for the New York Giants. If they lose out for the rest of the season, I think that the 3rd overall pick is probably going to have 4 wins just based on how many 4-win teams there are, and there's nobody sitting at 3 wins right now. So the Giants realistically could lose out here and still land the top 3 pick. How realistic that is, I'm not sure. If I had to give you my guess on where the Giants are going to land in the draft order, Alex, I'm going to say like 8th overall, and that's not a bad thing. I'm going to throw that out there and just say Josh Allen was the 8th overall pick in the draft. We've seen franchise quarterbacks go before 8, we've seen them go at 8, we've seen them go after 8. So I will say, I think realistically the Giants pick up 1 more win on their schedule. I think it's going to come against the Saints. The Saints are playing ugly football lately. They're on a 2-game losing streak. Derek Carr looks washed up like a beach, and I think that they're probably the team that the Giants end up beating. Like you mentioned with Green Bay, they have the ability to put up points. I think that they're going to beat us out of the bye week, but we'll see. It really is any given Sunday in the NFL. You never know. I'm here for the Tommy DeVito, Linsanity era. I love it. I'm loving what we're seeing from him. I hope he keeps developing and he can be our long-term backup quarterback. But in terms of the remaining schedule available for us, Alex, I do see the Giants picking up at least 1 more win. I don't think they're losing out, but if they do lose out, I think that the 3rd overall pick is still in the cards for them. How are you feeling about that? Looking at some of these other teams in the league who were competing for this draft pick, I mean by losing. Like, how are you feeling about this? Do you think that the top 3 pick is still in the cards for the Giants, or are you feeling like it's most likely, like I feel, it's going to end up being a later, closer to the 10th overall pick?
It's a good question. I mean, look, if you look at Tankathon right now, it's just kind of a hilarious name. I love that website. But, you look at Carolina, obviously number 1 right now. Arizona's probably not winning that many more games. If they do win another one, they're going to leapfrog New England. New England's definitely drafting a quarterback. And I feel like Drake May fits their mold. I think that he probably would be a good fit for them. Then you have Chicago, who I think will win at least 1 more game. And if the Giants lose out, they obviously leapfrog the Giants. Washington, not sure what happens to them, have lost 3 straight, definitely ailing at the moment. Tampa Bay, I think, wins another game. I think the Jets, we'll see. I think the Jets do end up winning another game. I think they win 5 or 6. So right now, I'd say the Giants really are competing with the Commanders, Chicago. Like those are the 2 teams that really stand out to me as like, okay, like those 2 teams, like we could end up in the 4 to 6 range. I think the Giants could win 1 or 2 more, but like Tennessee could win 1. They just won a game. The Chargers are due a win. The Jets are due a win. They've lost 4 straight. Chargers have lost 3 straight. I mean, that's what they're doing to Justin Herbert over there is like actually criminal. It sucks to see. Like their coaching is so bad, but I do think the Giants, like you said, 8 to 10 range. I think that we probably land in the 4-6 range personally, because I think the teams above us are a little bit better, if not significantly better, just kind of coached poorly at times. We've won 2 games. We are, I mean, by means we are probably due a loss. I think Green Bay is actually a good team that's very underrated. They're really hitting their stride. They're 5-6. They've won 2 back-to-back games and a big one against the Lions. So, it really depends. I think, like you said, there's a couple teams that are winnable. The Saints is a winnable game. Green Bay's, you could say winnable. I'd say we're definitely going to be heavily not favored in that game because we're also at Lambeau, and they're going to be playing well, and they're looking to make maybe a playoff run here. So I think Jordan Love is going to be inspired. And look, the truth is we are not winning games if we don't score more than 20 points, and we don't regularly score more than even 15 points. So we're going to have to score over 20 points to beat Green Bay. I just think that they're going to be a little bit too much for us to handle. But again, I hope that if we do win some games, we end up making the playoffs because it doesn't matter anyway. But I think we'll probably end up in the 4-6 range at the end of the day.
Yeah, and one thing that I will say, just a point that you mentioned earlier that I have to agree with, the worst thing that can happen to this team is they keep winning games and don't make the playoffs. So it's either they go balls to the walls, Tommy DeVito goes out there, keeps gunslinging, Darren Waller gets back in the lineup, starts balling out, Dexter Lawrence is back, he's still playing well, Andrew Thomas stays healthy, and all of a sudden Evan Neal gets touched by the hand of God, steps back onto the football field, and turns into Andrew Thomas 2.0. That all those things would have to happen, and then we could talk about realistically making the playoffs. It's not realistic. So I do agree with you, though, that the worst thing that can happen is this team wins about 7 games and is kind of like in the mix for the playoffs, but ultimately doesn't make it. That leaves them in nowhere land, like right in the middle of the draft class, in the first round picking order, that is. And that's a tough place to be for a GM. It's tough to scout the talents there. It's tough to pick the right guy because you get a lot of guys who are fringe top 10 picks but fell out for a good reason, or you start reaching for guys who should be going at the back end of the draft because you can't find a trade down partner. That's a really tough place for a GM to be picking. So either you want to be a playoff team and you want to ride, the coattails of being a playoff team and say we can hang our hat on that, like we made the playoffs, or you want to be picking most realistically in the top 10 because that's the cream of the crop on the prospects, and also those picks hold the most value. So even if you don't like the prospects on the board, you can trade down. So it is going to be really interesting, like I keep saying every episode, this final month of the season. A lot of storylines here for the New York Giants. Some of them really crappy, and it's like, oh my God, we suck. Others, hey, we got a chance at the playoffs. Hey, we have a chance at a top 5 pick. There's some cool stuff happening with the New York Giants. So, of course, we'll continue to update you on everything surrounding the New York Giants right here on Fireside Giants, talking about the draft pick, talking about the playoff push, and everything else in between right here on Fireside Giants. So, make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts on the topic down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. But without further ado, we'll catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.